Should we select someone to take over? Shannon, what's the protocol on that? Okay, good. Take it.
Good evening. It is now 6 p.m. and I call this special meeting. I'm sorry, it is now 6:30 p.m. and I call this special meeting of the City Council to order. The mayor and mayor pro tem are unable to join us this evening. In their absence, the city clerk is authorized by Madera City Code Section 2-1.11 to call the meeting to order and conduct an election of a temporary chair. As the meeting has been called to order, I will now conduct an election of a temporary chair. Is there a member of the council that would like to nominate a temporary chair?
I would like to nominate Councilmember Rodriguez.
Councilmember Mejia has nominated Councilmember Rodriguez. Do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilmember Evans. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Councilmember Rodriguez, you are now the acting chair.
Thank you, City Clerk Alicia Gonzalez. We'll now call this a special meeting of the Madera City Council to order. Today is Wednesday, March 27. It is now 6:31. The Madera City Council meetings are open to the public. This meeting will be available for public viewing and participation through Zoom. Members of the public may also observe the live stream meeting on the city's website at www.madera.gov/live. Members of the public may comment on the agenda items at the meeting or remotely through an electronic meeting via phone by dialing 669-900-6833, entering ID 862-1612-6771 and the hashtag. Comments will also be accepted via email at citycouncilpubliccomment@madera.gov or by regular mail at 205 West 4th Street, Madera, California 93637. We now call this meeting to order. Alicia, I'll ask to please take roll call.
Mayor Garcia, absent. Mayor Pro Tem Gallegos is absent. Councilmember Rodriguez,
Here.
Councilmember Montes,
Here.
Councilmember Evans,
Here.
Councilmember Mejia,
Here.
and Councilmember Villegas.
Here. Okay, I'll ask all to please rise and I'll ask Councilmember Evans to please lead us in an invocation.
This is the week of Holy Week. And this is the week that Christ entered into the tomb and he rose on the third day. Please bow your heads. Father God, thank you for this day, Father. Thank you for allowing us to attend this meeting this evening, Father, this special meeting. Thank you for bringing each one of us here safely. We ask that you protect and continue to watch over this council, this city, and all those that are present today. Father, we love you and we thank you. And we ask these blessings in your son's precious name, Christ Jesus. Amen.
I'll ask that you continue to stand and I'll ask Councilmember Mejia to please lead us on the pledge.
Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you again, Councilmember Evans and Councilmember Mejia. We'll now move on to the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve
Second.
agenda.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilmember Evans, a second from Councilmember Montes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Approval of the agenda. Moving on to public comment. Members of the public shall have an opportunity to address the city council regarding matters on this agenda. At the time the agenda item is called, speakers should limit their comments to 3 minutes. At this time, we'll open it up for public comment. Is there any member from the public wishing to make a comment? Anyone on Zoom and or phone?
We have none, Mayor.
Okay,
Council member.
no worries. Sounds good. We'll now close the public comment, move on to our scheduled workshop. A1, update on Measure T, report by DKS Associates.
Magic now?
I will look at it. Let's see here.
Man, I can control those with these, right? Yes, fabulous. Okay. Good evening, council members and folks in the audience tonight. My name is Kendall Flint. I'm a consultant with DKS Associates, and I'm here on behalf of the Madera County Transportation Authority to give you an update on Measure T. I think as many of you know, Measure T is a half-cent sales tax that was pardon me, was passed by voters in 2006. It is in its 17th year right now, but it will sunset in 2027. So what I'm here to do tonight is basically bring you an update of where the money has gone thus far, the work of the steering committee in terms of developing the new measure as we might go forward in November, and then also answering questions that the public or council members may have about this. I think most of you have probably already received a mailer that was sent out earlier this month. I encourage you to open it, read it. It does have some really good information about Measure T, where the money has gone, and opportunities for you to share what you'd like to see potentially in the future. To date, in the last 17 years, Measure T, the half-cent sales tax, has brought in $167 million to Madera County. The really interesting thing about that is that that money has been able to be leveraged or used to access additional funds at both the state and federal level. And we brought in actually $319 million in state and federal matching funds. By the time that the measure sunsets in 2027, we will have brought in about 219 million. Altogether, that's over $500 million. I can't understate the importance of that funds and those monies and how they were used here in both the city of Madera and across the county. Now, in the current measure, there are a number of different slices of the pie per se that were used for funding different types of transportation investments. These included local roads, Americans with Disabilities Act, transit, all kinds of other things. One thing we heard from folks from the last attempt at passage, and also just in general, is some of this was very confusing. You'll notice on one of these particular categories, it says environmental enhancement. And we'd ask people, do you know what that is? And they would say, absolutely not, I don't know. So one of the things that was really a prime goal on this was to find a way to clearly state how funds would be used in the future, and obviously to document how they were used in the past. So up until now, as many of you know, in the city of Madera, roughly 30%, a little less than a third of the city's overall local road maintenance budget comes directly from Measure T. That's also true in the city of Chowchilla. And the county gets about $2.5 million that it uses for its local road maintenance. Interesting to note, the county has no general fund that goes towards local streets and roads, so it relies entirely on this and money that comes in from SB1 and other sources for its local road maintenance program. So that includes things like bus stops, 42 of which have been built since this measure was passed in 2017. Now, we hear a lot, great, where did all the money go? This is very hard for anyone to read, whether they're at home or looking at a computer, but it is on our website. So of the $164 million that was brought in, the city of Madera saw 34 million. The county got about 43 million. Chowchilla's allocation was 5.6. And the remaining $81 million was used for things like regional programs and flexible spending that each agency was able to access for local projects in their area. Again, you can see here that we've got 10 different types of programs that were out there. What I'm going to talk to you about tonight is the guidance we've received from our steering committee, and that takes that down to just 3 areas, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Now, you've also probably noticed at the gas tank, whenever you go to fill up your tank, that it's more expensive here in California than it is pretty much anywhere else. And the reason for that is we have a very high gas tax that was implemented again, back in 2016. Now, a portion of those funds goes to local municipalities for their local streets and roads, but it's a very small amount. So of that funds, 60% goes to Northern California, 40% goes to Southern California, and then that's distributed by population, which means counties like Madera get very little of those monies. So we do get some, but it's just not enough to fill our transportation needs. When you couple that with the trend over the last several years, which is seeing the gas tax go down, the revenues go down, largely due to the increase of use of electric vehicles. And many of us have kids that are not driving. A lot of young people are no longer driving cars. And so because of that combination of the high cost of operating a motor vehicle and the electric vehicles, we are seeing the trend go continually lower. So if you think about the long-term impacts of that, lowering gas tax, and if Measure T goes away, that's a substantial amount of money that will no longer be on the table for this particular region. So that is why the Board of Directors of the Madera County Transportation Authority are trying to find a way to craft a expenditure plan that would reflect what the communities here in Madera County and the two cities really want to see. And this particular effort is really influenced heavily by the loss in 2022. A number of things contributed to that, not the least of which was in 2022, there was no sunset date. There was no end to the tax that the voters were being asked to support. We also know that there were some very big concerns about the manner in which the plan was developed. And so the idea here was that instead of having it being driven by elected officials, that instead it would be a citizen-based body that would come together representing different areas of the county and making sure that they could make a shall we say, a unbiased look at that. Now, what this group has done is started really from the bottom up. First of all, we know, and they've expressed very pointedly, that citizen oversight is a huge deal. So one of the things that this steering committee has come up with is a different approach to the Citizen Oversight Committee, where we would have one individual from each of the 5 supervisorial districts, along with an alternate that would meet at least quarterly to review how expenditures are made, monies that have come in from the tax. These meetings are open to the public. They are subject to the Brown Act. On top of that, we're talking about having the chair of the Citizens Oversight Committee appear regularly, at least quarterly, in front of the Board of Directors of the Madera County Transportation Authority, and really also including things that would encourage and enforce the jurisdictions to have annual meetings, public meetings, to discuss how they're going to invest Measure T funds in the upcoming year. An independent auditor that would take a look at all the financial statements that would be selected by the Citizen Oversight Committee, and then finally developing bylaws and guidance that would really establish norms to make sure that they are continuing to look at where the money's been spent and provide that annual report with very clear, focused, graphically driven information that says these are the projects we completed this year, this is the number of projects we've completed, and these are what we're doing with it. So the steering committee, again, is developing a plan for the length of the measure, which at this point is leaning towards a 30-year lifespan. It may be go to 20, but right now about 2/3 of that group is pushing for 30. The distribution of funds, which is the how the money can be spent. I think folks should know that this type of sales tax is different than other types. By law, you can only spend it on the specific categories that are outlined in the measure itself. So none of the jurisdictions could use Measure T funds and use it for parks or police or staff or anything else. It has to go exactly as it's supposed to. We're also looking at the allocation formula. I'm sure there's going to be some questions about that tonight. And that is really the formula by which, when we're talking about local streets and roads, how we determine what share the city of Madera gets versus the city of Chowchilla versus the county, and then finally oversight. We took the entire, or as many of the we wanted to go, we took the steering committee on a tour of the county, including here in Madera. So folks would have an understanding about the different challenges that various folks have in their jurisdictions. This allowed people to get a really good sense of what's happening up in the eastern part of the county, as well as what's happening in places like Lavina and Fairmead, and of course in here in Madera. It was a good trip. Thankfully that it was not raining that day. That was actually a blessed day to be out. Pardon me, I'm gonna sneeze. Not cold, allergy. It's all the pollen, which is lovely with all the trees blooming. It makes me very happy. Yeah.
Yes, it's on YouTube.
Okay. So for the city of Madera, I want to go through for folks basically how the funds were used here, at least some of them, and then we'll talk a little bit about the county and then for future distribution. So as I mentioned, about 1/3 of all street maintenance is funded by Measure T. You can see on this map here, these are just some of the roads that have been improved, rehabbed, and patched. We also have 3 additional traffic signals that were added in the city during this time, and all of these are directly related to Measure T expenses. On the project website, which is measuret-2024.com, you can get a look at all of these, as well as take a look at each annual audit. We'll show exactly how much money was spent for each category in each year. This information is available for all three agencies, the county, the city of Chowchilla, and the city of Madera, as well as Madera County Transportation Commission. Now, within these pieces, we have some really big projects that I think folks will be very aware of. One being the Ellis Overcrossing that connected folks from the north side to the west side of Highway 99. This was a very major project that was obviously funded by Measure T. And prior to construction, if you lived here long enough, you know you'd had to go all the way around to South Cleveland or north to Avenue 17. Another project, which I personally use almost every day, is the 4th Street widening. That's, of course, improving everything from Pine Street to Lake Street to make it easier to get across east-west in getting to City Hall, getting to the City Hall, the Madera County Administration Building, and other facilities that are here. The Fresno River Trail undercrossing, this is not only a bike and pedestrian trail, but it also connects parts, of the community together so that they can use alternative modes of transportation in order to get around and connected. Other projects include the Olive Avenue widening, that's from Gateway to Knox, and there are actually 3 phases in this, a third of which is going to be completed in 2024. And you can see here there's quite a bit of investment in infrastructure. And one thing I did want to kind of point out, I'm going to be using this as an example for some of our friends on the steering committee to show the difference between what a road looks like when there's a lot going on as opposed to some of the county roads that don't have as much. This is a perfect example of that. So I want to thank staff for providing that for us. Now, there's a number of projects the city has looking at in the future that could be funded by Measure T. One thing to keep in mind in this when we talk about these larger projects. Okay, all right, fine. One of the things to keep in mind is these bigger projects. The key here is to leverage those funds. So as an example, SB1, that Senate Bill 1 that was passed in 2016, has $200 million a year that is set aside only for use by self-help counties. So you have to be a self-help county in order to access these funds. And these funds would be critical in order to be able to implement things like the Westbury Bridge, which really connects a bifurcated community right now because you can't get from one side to the other. The Cleveland grade separation, which the folks on our tour noted as being one of the less fun places to go in Madera with all the different confluence of those roadways. We also have Avenue 13, a Gateway Bridge widening, and the Tozer Street widening at Avenue 15 in the left-hand turn widening. So these are just a few of the projects, but I also want to be clear that with the new guidelines for citizens oversight, that every year the city would be holding some sort of a workshop or a public hearing so that people could come to the meeting and say, here's what we'd like to see next year. Here's the projects that we'd like to see built. Here's the streets we would like to see addressed. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Now, Madera County has also had a substantial benefit from Measure T. These are just some of the projects that were implemented in the eastern part. This includes both Measure A, which is the original measure that goes back now 35 years. That was the first 15 were Measure A. The last 20 or 17 will be Measure T. All of these projects, including maintenance districts in some of these areas, were also receiving funding from Measure T and being able to use those funds to actually stretch dollars to make them go further. These are just some of the projects that exist on the western side of the county as well. All of these maps are available also on the project website, so you can take a look and print them out and get more information. Now, there are a number of large infrastructure projects that were funded by Measure T, and among them would be the Oakhurst Midtown Connector. One thing that's really important about this one, you'll note at the bottom, not only was it a great project for relieving congestion and making it easier for people to get up and down, but this project leveraged $5 million from competitive funds from SB1. That's what I was talking about, at that $200 million per year. This is one of the projects that qualified for that. Without a measure, we would not have been able to get those funding. Ditto for the SR 41 passing lanes. Some of you probably have driven on those from time to time. This project actually accessed $11 million in state funds in order to make that project happen. The Road 200 Bridge is one of the projects that got 100% Measure T funded, which is actually kind of unusual, but it was able to happen with this one. And in fact, it's been recognized for the excellence of the construction and the way that that came together. Avenue 26, Road 29 rehab, $22 million were leveraged on this project. That's $22 million that the county would not have without having the ability to leverage those funds and apply for those grants. And then finally, we've got the Road 225 roundabout. This used what's called CMAQ, Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Funds. Those are funds that basically reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So if you have a roundabout, theoretically, your car is constantly moving, so you're not stopping and starting. And that, of course, helps us all out. Avenue 7 rehabilitation between 145 and SR 99. And again, this one was creative financing, if you will. We were able to use coronavirus response funds as well as Measure T funds to make that happen. Now, Madera City, the city of Madera, sits within the county. And I just wanted to point out that even though we are in Madera tonight, obviously folks that live here and work here do go from other places here to other cities and go to and from for work or other things. So we are acutely aware of the challenges of the county to maintain its roadways. Currently, the county roadways pavement condition sits at about a 44. Pavement condition is measured on a scale of 1 to 100, with 1 basically being dirt and 100 being a new road. The average condition in most of California is about 66. Now, why are our roads poor? One, we have less funding than other agencies. We also are competing with a large network. There's, basically 1,500 road miles that the county is trying to maintain. On top of that, we're dealing with, weather and other things, especially on the eastern part of the county where we've got challenges. And it's not, it's also not, it's not a coincidence that the agriculture industry here, where we've got so many large trucks moving in and out, also takes its toll on our local roadway system. So in order to keep us from going any further into the lovely potholes where we're playing golf and trying to get through that, we've got to take a look at what we can actually do. Now, currently, the city of Madera, the city of Chowchilla, and the county are taking a look at pavement management plans, which is basically looking at the current condition of all roads within the system, assessing them for their scale, where they are on that piece. And then it kicks out a report every year that says, okay, if we only have this much money to invest, what's the highest and best use of that investment? And that means how much money goes for rehabilitation, for patching, for complete revisiting of a road, right? So currently, the county's plan shows that it's $16.5 million a year. That's just enough money to keep things as they are today at that pavement condition of a 44, which is not great. And I just want to make it clear that even if Measure T comes back in the fall and it's passed, it's not like overnight in the county, everybody's roads gets better. And it's also true that in the city of Madera, where your pavement condition hovers around 66, 65, 66, somewhere in there, it'll allow you to continue to maintain those, but it doesn't necessarily, if it remains the same, go that much further up. If we don't get those funds, and if the SB1 funding also goes down, the county will probably slide closer into this scenario 1, which is failing roadway conditions. If we get slightly more money, we would see an increase and an improvement in that. Now, why this is important is because what we learned from people in the field, most people we've talked to, this is true on the polling that's been done, of the 20 or 30 different meetings that we've had with different local organizations, the number one thing they talk about is local streets and roads, potholes, the condition of their local roadway systems, and making that safer and better. Not just the roads, though, it's also about bridges. The county currently has 162 bridges, one of which is functionally obsolete, 27 are deficient. So Measure T funds are being leveraged right now to apply for grants to fix those. Again, without the ability to leverage, we are unlikely to be able to have an opportunity to fix or restore these to their best and highest use. So we want to talk a little bit tonight about what folks want here in Madera. I want to kind of tell you a little bit about what the steering committee has come up with. Having 10 or 12 different little buckets of money did not seem efficient, and it was not really supported by the public the best that we could tell. So the steering committee came up with a plan that said, all right, let's narrow this down. So we have one for local streets and roads, One for safe routes to schools. This would be crosswalks, bike paths, things like that, that get people, whether it's grade school or high school or the community colleges. Evacuation preparedness came up really big on the eastern part of the county, but also here in the more urbanized areas. We've got high-speed rail coming in. We've got other things happening. We can have weather events. We can have flooding. There's all kinds of things where people are saying, you know, we'd like to have a little bit more flexibility to be able to plan for these type of things should they occur. Transit is another piece that people have talked about, and the idea that they'd like to see different types of transit, not just the buses, but the idea of point to point or van pools, things that might make it a little bit easier and more flexible for people to get around. There are still a lot of folks that want to see bike and pedestrians, and then regional projects. Other is still out there. What is other? We talked about other many times. It can be anything from like broadband. We have a lot of places that don't have access to high-speed internet. And you might say, why does that have anything to do with transportation? If people can work from home, they're less likely to commute. If you're in an emergency situation, having broadband makes emergency responders and others, it's easier for them to get out information. It's also easier for all agencies to be able to control things like signals and signal timing and other types of things. So it can be a really important piece. Now, what the steering committee landed on is that instead of having all of these categories, they'd have one for local streets and roads. And underneath that, we would put safe routes to schools, evacuation preparedness, and bike and pedestrian. And that would allow each municipality and the county to determine what sort of package is best for them. So your folks in the city of Madera, you may not want to invest a whole lot in evacuation preparedness, but you may have more need for bike, pedestrian, or safe routes to schools. This gives the ultimate flexibility for you, your community, and your staff to allocate those funds to their highest and best use that is best in need with your community. There'd be a separate group for transit and then a separate for regional projects. So what the steering committee is toying with right now, and I'd like to get the reaction tonight, is what if we increase the amount for local streets and roads to 75%? It's currently at 25% for local streets and roads, and then another 23 and something percent. It comes to about 47% that can be used locally. So this is substantially more money or a higher allocation that would be used for those local projects. And that would drop our regional projects down to about 20%, and then transit would be at about 4%, which is doubling what it has right now. And then all of these would also include another percent for the administration that gives the oversight committee the ability to conduct those audits, to have the annual reports, and to have those quarterly meetings that can be available to the public. Tonight is the 8th of the meetings that we've been having at the town halls. At the previous 7, folks have been very supportive of the increase in money for local streets and roads. It seems to be in keeping with what they want to see, but I certainly would love to hear from council and the folks in the audience tonight about their opinions on that. And I'd also like to point out that if you are interested in learning more about these allocations and also want to share your ideas, the project website, which is also promoted in the mailer, we've set up a really cool tool there that allows people to basically budget however they like. So you can tell us what you would do with Measure T funds, and you can allocate it all to local streets and roads, or you can put it in any of the categories that you see fit, or tell us about a new one. Now, just in the last week, we're seeing about 1,000 folks go to this website and share their ideas. And so it's actually going quite well. We would like to see more of that, and we encourage people to share that information. And then we're going to take all of that along with the polling, along with the feedback we're getting at all these town halls, bring that back to the steering committee, and then a meeting later in April, they're going to refine their recommendations for an expenditure plan and an overall approach. And then that would go back before the Madera County Transportation Authority, and then later come back should they choose to move that on to the city of Madera, the city of Chowchilla, and the county. It's easy to use. It is also bilingual, multilingual. You can click any language you like in order to share your ideas. And we also are going into the community with paper versions of these things, so that if someone is not particularly computer savvy, there's opportunities to share that way as well. And as you can see, just for our preliminary, this is a snapshot from a couple of weeks ago, local streets and roads continues to be the top getter of these other things that are out there. This is my contact information, and also with me tonight is Deputy Director Troy McNeil from the Madera County Transportation Commission / Authority. And with that, I would be really excited to answer any questions that you might have or hear any comments from the council and from those that are participating online or here in the audience tonight.
Thank you, Kendall, for that presentation. Very thorough. I know it was a lot, but I'd want to give this council an opportunity to ask questions. I'm not sure if any of my colleagues here have any questions for Kendall. Councilmember Mejia.
Thank you, Councilmember Rodriguez. Thank you, Kendall, for this presentation. My question is, you did predict it. I wanted to know how is the allocation determined currently and whether that would change?
It's a great question, and it was a subject of, shall we say, spirited discussion this week, and I would like to thank your city manager and staff for attending that. Currently, the allocation, and this is specific to the local street and road portion, right? Because the regional, those go into a different pot. The transit goes to the transit providers. But on local streets and roads, it is currently set at population. And population is reset every year by the California Department of Finance. And so if people get more folks into their communities, it goes up. Obviously, if they get less, then that changes. The steering committee has been sort of grappling with an idea about whether or not they want to shift that over to include a portion of that weight on local road, the number of roads that are maintained by the agency. The challenge is, and I'd like to again thank your staff for attending that meeting because they made it very clear that roads in Madera, like the one I was showing on Olive, right? Your roads are denser. They have a lot more in terms of infrastructure. They are wider. They've got sidewalks, curbs, gutters, a lot more to it than some of the county roads. And the other piece that came out of that was a possible discussion about shifting it to sales tax, where your city manager suggested that that might be something to look at and see with each jurisdiction, how much sales tax are they bringing in? And if that sales tax, if that works for everyone, then that perhaps could be the new metric where the distribution of the funds would go by sales tax. That decision is going to be made by the steering committee at its April meeting. Staff will be attending on that. And we've also expressed to them that, you know, in the current scenario, the county is actually giving up some, in their mind, they're giving up some funding because obviously they've got more roads than everybody else, but they feel like, especially with the increased amount of money they're going to get, going from basically 47 or 48% for local roads up to 75%. They're happy with that. Both the city of Madera and the city of Chowchilla staff have made it clear that they would like to continue with either population or sales tax. So I can't tell you tonight what it's going to be, but I can tell you that we will know that in April and that you are being very well represented by your staff and your city manager. We've also made it very clear to the steering committee. The object here is not for me to say what it should be, and we are empowering them, but the steering committee, all of them, they're on the same page that they would like to see something pass, right? So if the citizens of Madera or the citizens of Chowchilla feel that they're getting shortchanged on this, that is a very large voting block. And so it's not in their interest to put together a plan that would be opposed by that. So I think we got, I'm not going to say consensus, but we did have a good discussion that led us to believe that if it turns out that sales tax and population are kind of the same, I think we're probably more likely to continue in that vein and not take a look at road miles. At least that was my impression at the last meeting.
Thank you.
Councilmember Montes. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Evans.
Thank you very much for seeing you again today as opposed to, well, it's as well as last week, and Troy, you as well. Questions were asked of me is how, from some of my residents, wanted to know how the distribution is going to be. Will the funds be more so up Highway 41 going toward Oakhurst, or will it be centrally located within here in the city of Madera? And how's it going to be divided?
Okay, so 75% of the funds in this scenario, and again, they haven't finalized it, but let's say they're leaning on that. If it is the way it is today, then basically the city of Madera controls their 75%, and you can do whatever you want with it. And again, that's based on a population. And in this scenario, that means that that money can be used for local streets and roads, safe routes to schools, bike, pedestrian, ADA compliance, whatever you like to do. And those funds cannot be, touched by anybody else. That's that. Transit goes right to the transit operator. So they have that. The regional projects are all coming out of the regional transportation plan. And that's something that the city of Madera, the city of Chowchilla, and the county have all contributed to. So the idea most of the time is that those funds are determined by what's in the regional transportation plan, and then the availability of grant funds in order to implement. So for example, on the 41 widening, not widening with the passing lanes, there was grant funding, there was an opportunity, and they were able to take advantage of that. But Westbury Bridge is a pretty good example of one that could be a regional project that could be selected. It is on the tier 1 list, and that could happen at that point. The selection of each project or what's in the list would be determined on an annual basis by open hearings that say, okay, here's what we're going to do this year in the annual work plans. Each jurisdiction has its own annual work plan for the funds you control. And then there's a separate one that's handled by MCTC, and that board of which you have members on there that would then select for the region. So I think, the goal with all of this is not to concentrate the investments in any one area, but make sure that there's adequate representation in all 5 supervisorial districts so that it's equally distributed.
Okay, great. Thank you for explaining that. Thank you.
Councilmember Montes?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I do have a question regarding leveraging funds. So I know we speak in acronyms on a lot of this SB1, MCTC. So the leverage funds is 300 million over 17 years, and that was for both city and county.
Yep.
So that's about 17 and change a year. Do we have the breakdown on where that went to county, city, or that's just in general for the whole county?
So
The whole county?
that's the whole county. I will say that those leveraged funds tend to be for the regional projects, larger projects, but that doesn't necessarily mean that happens like that all the time. There are opportunities for different types of leveraged funds. For example, although I don't believe it was Measure T funds. Bless you.
Thank you.
Allergy, right? Okay. No, okay. As an example, the county got 2.5 million for the avenue that's right in front of Lavina. We just got $112 million that was secured by MCTC for improvements. They'll be on 99 and some other connectors that go into that. So there are opportunities out there. I think that one of the things that we try to look at, both staff working with your staff as well, is, what are the priority projects? How do they fit in current grant opportunities that are offered at the state? And you're absolutely right. It's like the alphabet soup of all the different things they've got going on, and they change, right? The SB1 funds, which is the Recovery and Repair Act of 2008, 2016, that has a specific carve out of 200 million a year, which I was talking about. That can only be used by self-help counties.
But
So
there are other pots.
there are other
Is that-
pots. Yeah. Yeah. There's congestion mitigation. There's projects for reducing vehicle miles traveled. There's a ton of money right now in active transportation planning. They call those ATP grants, which is basically planning for bike, pedestrian, and other connections in communities. There's also funding for what's called Vision Zero, which is basically safety programs. So let's say you have an area or a corridor in your city where perhaps there are, higher incidents of, collisions or, vehicles and pedestrians that are crashing in. You can get grant funding to perform studies and implement things that can bring down, whether it's traffic calming or putting in signals or putting in, speed bumps, whatever they're calling them today. But all those kind of things have different funding sources.
And you said those are available to self-help counties. So that's something that we have to make application in conjunction with the county, or is that something that the city can actually apply separately?
The city can apply separately as underneath their Measure T, like when you make your application, right? So one of the things they'll ask you is what money do you have in it? So for example, the one I was just talking about, the Highway 99, in the application, you'll see a line item that said $9,000 of Measure T funds. So $9,000 of Measure T funds goes in and 112 million comes out. So it's other funds that come in there too, but yes. And one thing I think your staff already knows about this as well is that both the MCTC staff and the agency staff work collaboratively to identify these types of funding opportunities that are out there. There's a lot of shared knowledge and there's a lot of, support for what might work well for other agencies and how you can leverage those funds.
Okay. And then it's my final question. Hopefully nobody reads too much into this, but so if self-help counties, so say, because this is our second go around, right?
Yep.
So say it's not successful, but then the city chooses to go
Yep.
and say, okay, we're gonna do our own self-help city, would the city be able to apply for those grants as well, or it has to be a county?
It technically, we were in fact, we were just having a discussion about that. So the way that it was written was for self-help counties, but they've allowed a few local jurisdictions to apply. However, the success rate is quite low, largely because you don't have as much money to leverage. So as an example, and just so everybody is clear, we've been saying this to people for the last couple of months, that basically if we can't find some way to make this work for everyone in November, Madera is likely to go it alone. And the challenge with that is that if you do choose to do that, district tax is different than the local sales tax, and we're at that ceiling, okay? So if you were to pass your own half-cent sales tax, which you absolutely could do, it would mean that the city of Chowchilla and the county could not. Two things that affect that. That means that your neighbors all the way around and your residents who will drive on county roads and go from other places will not see those repairs in the county. That will not happen. That also has a direct impact on our agriculture folks that are out there, the ability to do goods and services and the local economy. On top of that, there are other challenges in that when you have a larger regional tax, those regional projects or regional dollars become much larger, right? So because we have 3 jurisdictions instead of just one city, those funds go up, which gives you more leverage to do things like seek funding for the Westbury Bridge, because you'll have more money to draw on. So I think we all understand the reality of our situation, which is we would very much like to have a measure that everyone likes and we can get past. But we've also been very clear with the steering committee and with others that if you choose to not support, then the likelihood is, of course, that Madera will go out at its loan, and it will be to the detriment of the county and the city of Chowchilla, which I know you're not doing intentionally. So I'm not suggesting that you're trying to undercut anybody, but that it would be the net result.
Okay, thank you.
We do have a question from Councilmember Villegas.
Yes, yeah, I have this question. We have this much money. How long is projected to be invested and in the future, how often we can get more?
So
another question.
at this point, the half cent is as high as we can go in this particular county at this time. And currently, the current measure ends in 2027. I believe the steering committee is moving towards a 30-year measure. If they do that, it would extend to 2057. If they go for a 20-year measure, it'll end in 2047. At any time during that period, if the residents and the citizens of the county wanted to revisit either the allocations or the distributions, they would be able to do that by taking it back out to the voters, and they would again need a 2/3 vote in order to change that. And I think that's really important for people to recognize. We were talking earlier with Wengel about trust. These dollars are locked in. That's probably one of the tightest locks of tax money in the state of California. So once you lock this in, whichever this distribution is, that's it until somebody comes up and says, okay, I want to change this to 50% or 100%. Another thing to consider is that if the city did move forward with its own tax, it would have to be, in order to access any of those funds, even on a chance, it would have to be only transportation. So you couldn't pass a measure that says it's going to be, for example, transportation in parks or transportation in PD or a general tax, right? It would have to be specifically for that purpose. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Very well.
Thank you, Councilmember Villegas. We do have another question from Councilmember Mejia.
Thank you. I actually had this question from a resident, and they wanted to know, how can we ensure that communities that haven't historically benefited from it would be prioritized?
Great question. And we have got about I would say a little less than about 20% of our steering committee are from disadvantaged communities. And so this is one of the concerns they have. And one of the things that we've been talking about is, since we're going so high with a 75% investment in local streets and roads, they're talking about possibly having a set aside of maybe 10% of that amount that is designated specifically for disadvantaged communities or those that have roads that are, let's say, below 40 or have been, traditionally overlooked. And that would give the opportunity for, I believe, I was talking with Ellen, there are some places here in Madera that would have that. There's definitely places in the county. And that seems to be something that they're, willing and interested in discussing. So that's what we're thinking, is it probably will be a carve out within that 75% because there will be enough funds. One thing to keep in mind, which I know your public works folks know, it seems to make no sense to the public, and I understand it, but it is cheaper to maintain good roads for a longer period of time and extend their life than it is to repair a really, really bad road. Because a really, really bad road may cost as much as $2 million, whereas that patch that extends something for 10 or 15 years may only cost $500,000. So there's different ways of looking at it. But that being said, we did town halls in Fairmead and Lavina, and we've talked to these folks, and there are some places out there where the roads are really, really bad and dangerously so. And that's the same in parts of the Eastern County. So there's no doubt that we need to come up with a plan to make that happen. But that coupled with, I think, the implementation of these pavement management plans that the city of Madera, city of Chowchilla, and also the county are looking at, will kind of take the emotion out of it a little bit and just have a really good objective look about where the highest and best use of those funds are and what can be done for those communities to help them address some of their infrastructure needs on a local level.
Okay. And then when you talk about the 75%,
Mhm.
we're talking about the city of Madera, right?
Every city, the city of
Okay.
Madera, city of Chowchilla, and the city of, and the county. So of all the money, pardon my math, but let's say that's $100 million. It's more than that, but $100 million. That means that of $100 million, $75 million is going to go to local streets and roads. And then it'll be distributed by that percentage to the city of Madera, city of Chowchilla, and the county.
Okay, yeah, because local's different to everyone.
Yeah.
So
It's the local feeder roads. It is different. And we're developing some language to say, give a little more heft to that. But the other part to keep in mind that a local road may also be like one of your larger arterials, which have a lot of traffic going through. And those can also become regional projects, right? Because as you're going through different places, it may rise to that level. But this is for the local roads in your communities, in your neighborhoods that are connecting people to their work, schools, jobs, church, all that good stuff.
thank you.
Thank you, Kendall. Before I get to Councilmember Evans, I did want to just ask for an example, and because it's very confusing sometimes when we say 75%, $100 million. So in simple terms, if the county generates $1 million,
Mhm.
right, $1 million, then 750,000 of that would go to these local agencies, and that would be divvied up by their population.
Correct.
Assuming Madera 30%, or let's just say 300,000 for the city of Madera, 300,000 for the county, and 150,000 for Chowchilla. The other 200,000 are for regional projects. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then you have the 1%, which is 10,000, and then the 4% that go to a different pot. So in a sense, for every $1 million, if the population in that equation served us right, then we would be receiving $300,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think your number is actually closer to 380, but
Well,
yes.
yeah, I'm just, I'm
Whatever it
giving,
is,
I'm
yeah.
trying to,
Yeah.
I'm trying to make it very simple
Yeah.
so that
Yep.
we all understand, because it is confusing to some extent. And I think it's important to recognize that 75% is of local control here. So the city of Madera would then decide how that 75% is utilized, or how it's best utilized by us providing, like we do now. We go through our budget, we go through our 5-year capital improvement plan, and some of those plans include transportation, anything that's got to do with transportation. And we would have an audience, obviously our public, to come here and tell us, hey, we would rather want us to use some of those funds to tackle on these issues with transportation. We, the body of the city council, would then have that authority to do so. And I think the misconception is that the MCTC board may have that. I think MCTC only deals with the regional side of it, right? But that's what the steering committee that's what they're trying to implement right now, to see where the categories lie, the percentages, and what have you. Now, if you may, or if you will, can you please expand on self-help? I think it's very important to understand that, because when I hear self-help, I'm thinking, okay, it's something that I can help myself, but how does that work in all the counties here in California? We have 58 counties. How does that work for us here in Madera, and why are we a self-help?
So it's a great question. And interestingly enough, about 88% of the population in California live in a self-help county. And this is what happened. Basically, a number of agencies, the first one was actually Orange County in the 70s, got tired of sending money to Sacramento and then not getting that money back. So what they started to look at is a mechanism that would say, okay, we will tax ourselves, but you, Sacramento, don't get to touch it at all. So what happens is a self-help county is designated when a agency, it can be a county or it can be, in this case, MCTC as that body because it represents everyone. Self-help counties set a tax. They set a tax for a particular transportation, and then they set a plan for the way those funds will be distributed. Currently in California, there are 28 self-help counties. They generate about $3 billion a year in infrastructure investments for California. Madera becoming one 35 years ago, or I guess 33 years ago, was one of the early adopters of this, actually. There were not that many up until about 12 years ago. So you guys were actually ahead of the game. That allows access to funds that other agencies, other counties don't get. And so for a number of years, if you've ever driven up 99, both Merced and Stanislaus, they passed their measures in 2016. They didn't have any funding. So that was one of the reasons if you drove up in some of those areas, you could actually see the road go junky and then get better again, and then go junky and then get better again. So in Madera, the reality is this is the one highest and best way for you to control your own sales tax revenues and spend, to your point, exactly as you see fit within the parameters of that transportation. So self-help counties are, the name came from helping themselves to fund their own transportation investment. Now, you were able to get grant funding of various types, again, up until the whole time. But as of 2016, it changed dramatically with Senate Bill 1, the Restoration and Recovery Act, because it did have that set aside of $200 million a year only for those 26 counties that are self-help. And so that means, yes, you're competing with some of the other agencies, but you still are able to get to those funds. And also we have, frankly, some aging infrastructure here, higher need, disadvantaged communities, which makes us more likely to be successful in some of those grant applications than some of our neighbors. Those that are not self-help do not have those access to those things and do not get anything other than their small amount, 12 cents on the gallon, that then gets distributed. I think I figured it out once. It's like, you put in 12 cents, you get back like, a quarter of a cent. It's not very much. So that is it was a very forward thinking thing for the county to do for Measure A, and then of course to renew in Measure T. And it really has been, $500 million is a lot of money that we would not have here if it hadn't had Measure T.
Thank you, Kendall. And just to wrap up my my question or my comment, so in a way, one would say that Measure T is not the solve-all because it's only a small amount of money that allows us to leverage because of this self-help situation that we're in, but it doesn't solve all of the PCI, doesn't solve every single transportation need because it's only such a small amount in the bucket of other funds that you can combine to leverage millions of dollars. And I think that's what we've done before. I do want to emphasize that this current measure that we have is not of the doing of this council and not of the doing of the majority of the board members of the MCTC. So the allocations of different categories and or funds are bigger. I want to say, Troy, if you can correct me, 35% maybe to regional?
It's now, right now, it's 40. We went from local roads went from 46 to 75 in the current, right? Regional went down a bit, but I would say,
What I mean is the existing,
Yeah.
not the one that's proposed. The proposed one is saying 20%, but the existing now 26%. So that in a sense, I mean, I've had a lot of constituents discontent with the fact that a lot of those allocations were allocated to regional projects that sometimes we as a city obviously
Right.
didn't see a benefit as others did in maybe the county or in different areas. But again, that's why there is this council of government, so to speak, or transportation committee that consists of three different agencies leveraging together to try to maximize the amount of funds that they can get. That being said, this proposal is reducing that amount of regional, allowing more for local control and giving us an opportunity to, again, spend those dollars in the way that best suits our communities. Is that correct?
It is, and I would, I would also, if he's got a mic, defer to Keith and or Ellen. One of the things that's really important to note is because of the way the categories were set up before, staff was kind of, hamstrung. They had to use only those categories. And so one of the things that we found in speaking with them is that because of this flexibility, it allows Madera to develop a plan that's unique to your residents and your needs that may be very different from Chowchilla or the county. And so it took away, like, for example, there was a carve out in the last measure for Americans with Disabilities Act. That's a requirement. You don't get to not do that. We all have to do it. But as an example, the county doesn't have as many of the roads that would need to spend that money, right? But you might. So in this case, you can use the funds for that, but you're not required to. So again, Madera may have a use for those kind of funds. The county may not. This kind of flexibility allows staff to work with the council and then really determine what the community priorities are and make those work for you.
We do have one other comment and I'll open it up to public. Councilmember Evans, I think you, did I miss anyone
Yes.
else?
I was asked to ask you to define self-help.
The term self-help is referring to a county in California that establishes a sales tax specific for transportation and utilizes that to implement a transportation improvement plan for local residents. It can be implemented by a county or by an association of governments.
Okay, great.
So
Thank you.
in other words, if I may, you're taxing yourself.
Correct.
You're taxing yourself. You're allowing to tax yourself to be able to generate funds.
Yes, I think it's also important to note, though, which is a good thing, we do have tourists that come to this area and they are also using the roads. They are also paying that tax, which is why you go for a sales tax as opposed to, let's say, a property tax or another type of revenue generator, right? Because anybody who decides to come up to Yosemite or go up to Oakhurst or any of our lakes or any of the places, wine tasting, whatever it is, they're coming here to spend money. And when they do that, they're using our roads. And in spending that money, they're giving us funds to improve our roads.
Thank you. We did
Thank
have
you.
a question from Councilmember Mejia.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Rodriguez, and I'm glad that Arnoldo's there is asking these questions about sales tax. I wanted to know if there is data available on the geographic origin of the sales tax that funds Measure T, like broken down.
Oh, by which like by jurisdiction?
Yeah.
So great question. And we are actually coming up with that. We do get quarterly reports from our consultant, HDL, and we're going to be publishing those quite soon because that was a request that the steering committee had. So we're going to be taking a look at that and then we're going to do it by jurisdiction. So it'll show City of Madera, City of Chowchilla, and the county and how much revenue they bring in. Just as a reminder, it does not include transient occupancy tax. That's a different tax that doesn't go into the same bucket, but this is point of sale tax. It doesn't apply to things like prescriptions. It doesn't apply to fresh food. It's the same thing when you pay sales tax if you're at a restaurant or you're at a clothing store or you're buying a car, that's the sales tax we're talking about.
Thank you.
We do have, I'm going to open this up now to public. It looks like we have some participants wanting to make some comments. Please step up to the podium. And Kendall, I would say that not to get too far away because, yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Hi, DJ Becker, the Madera News, and also on behalf of the ADA Commission or Council, excuse me. And I spent 30 minutes with Kendall and she's on it and she's awesome. Answered a lot of my questions. My concerns regarding the ADA Council is our second concern after pedestrian safety is interconnectivity or bus routes. The buses do not take people where they want to go. That's something that's been seriously overlooked here for a long time. And we've been working on that, but I don't know how we're going to remedy that. And I hope to speak with you folks a little bit later on that subject. Interconnectivity to Fresno and Chowchilla also comes up, and we have very low ridership. I spent a few minutes today observing the Orange Line over by Yosemite Manor, and there's very few people on our brand new larger buses, simply because they don't meet the needs of where the riders want to go. And that's obviously an issue. The other concern that has come up is trust with our friends across the street. I have 2 pages of questions and comments from people that have strong opinions about the county. Mainly, why do we have a $5 or $6 million budget deficit? Why can't Madera County balance their budget? How many deputy sheriff's positions are now unfilled because of the deficit spending? How many fire stations are underfunded and closed because of the county's budget deficit spending? Okay, I think that, and the number one in the word cloud here is, why should residents trust Madera County supervisors now with collecting and spending any more of their tax dollars after the experiences they've had with that commission or that organization? And then the other question that I had was, what happens to our roads if Measure T fails and sunsets? And I suspect that's pretty grim.
Yes. Thank you. May I respond to those? Respond?
Oh, yes,
Okay,
please.
okay. I just want to make sure the protocol right. First of all, I want to make sure we're clear. The county is not the collector. It's the Madera County Transportation Commission. A lot of the points you've made are probably best suited for the Board of Supervisors, but let me talk a little bit about what happens if Measure T goes away. So it's not a pretty picture, and I want to just be very blunt about this. The county, as an example, needs $363 million to get its roads up to snuff. There's no way they're going to get that from Measure T. The city of Madera relies on Measure T currently for 30% of its local road maintenance. When that goes away, you'd have to find a different funding source. Now, in your case, you could probably consider a 0.5-cent sales tax, but it would not do anything for you. Again, on the regional, it wouldn't be as much, I guess I should say. So there's a lot of different variables there. But if the tax does not pass, and if it does not be approved by voters, the county's roads are probably heading south of 40 in terms of the pavement condition, which means they are going to get worse. The time that it will take for that to happen is probably within a 3 to 5 year period. And then it will continue to get worse unless there's another funding source that is identified. Now, the county, as I mentioned, currently does not spend any money from its general fund. So if it was going to do that, they'd have to divert $2 million from either police, fire, or someplace else. I don't know what it would be, but they'd have to find a place to patch that. That's ditto for the city of Chowchilla, which would also have a challenge. The other part of that, obviously, is the leveraging. The ability to leverage those funds and get more money would be lost. Now, we projected out, if it is a 30-year measure, again, accounting for inflation and everything else, you're probably looking at as much as $750 million to $1 billion that could be lost to this community over the next 25, 30 years. So it's a very substantial amount of money that's on the table that we'd be walking away from if T does not pass.
Thank you, Kendall. Do we have any other members of the public wishing to make a comment? Sir, if you'd like to, please stand up. DJ, your question.
DJ Becker, one follow-up comment. Why does the Madera County Board of Supervisors continue to operate without a basic standard code of ethics? And then I have a comment from Eastern Madera County folks. Hope they can get their stuff together and make some changes. Otherwise, this will never pass. Pretty unanimous sentiment due to overall mistrust with our Board of Supervisors. Eastern Madera County folks. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, DJ. Do we have anyone else looking to make some comments? Please step up to the podium, sir.
My name is Larry Rena. I live on 4th Street here in Madera. My pet peeve, and Kendall here mentioned it briefly, was the signals and the timing it seems like the signals are woefully out of date. And what I mean by that is they're not set for the timing of the flow of traffic. It seems like it turns green and it just stays green, almost like, it feels like forever, way past the cars have already gone. And it doesn't react. Now, I used to live in the Bay Area before I retired, and those signals seemed like they're hooked up to react to the traffic flow. It just seems like there's eternal waits at these signals, and both the green and the red, and I don't know. It just seems to me they're not modernized. Is my point of view. My other pet peeve is the transportation thing. It doesn't appear to me that there's a regular bus from Madera to Fresno, and specifically Madera to the Fresno airport. That is something I could definitely use. If I, instead of driving to the Madera airport, I got to pay the parking fees, keep going up and everything. It would be great to be able to get a bus that would take me to the Fresno airport, but whatever. I guess that's something way down in the future. That's the end of my speech.
Thank you, Mr. Reyna. And I'm sure staff has annotated the comments you made regarding the signals. And again, maybe a line directly to the airport. I know we're trying to work on trying to accommodate that. As Kendall said earlier, this is what those transportation dollars will help us is to find solutions for better utilizing of our transportation, whether it's a van pool and or different modes of transportation. I always thought that flashing the high beams definitely switched it on point, but I guess that doesn't work anymore. Okay, so we're gonna have to get a clicker for myself and Mr. Reyna. But no, I think it is important to consider that. I noticed the same thing, Mr. Reyna. When I go down, I see the same thing, and I just can't, why can't this thing just turn green and it's sitting there? But I do understand the frustration. Our staff has taken those notes down, and well, hopefully we can address that as well.
I just got a photograph of a broken stoplight from a resident on Gateway and Country Club. I just sent it to Alicia and Arnaldo. The red, green, yellow is so faint that it's not visible, which is a very big safety hazard. Where the arrow is brightened, so comments galore tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And we appreciate that. That's the purpose of this workshop, is to try to get, engagement with our community, get their comments and their views of what, how we should better utilize these funds that are coming, especially with Measure T. I don't know if we have anyone on call or anyone on Zoom wishing to make a comment. We do have a gentleman stepping up to the podium.
We have no one on Zoom and no written public comment,
Right.
council member.
Thank you.
Good evening, City Council members. Ed McIntyre, Madera, California. Am I on the clock already? Okay, I see that I am. I have just a few questions. What's the deadline to get the measure on the ballot for the 24 election in November? Stop the clock.
If you like, let's go ahead and stop those. Did you want to ask your questions all at once? And see if-
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so the process is this: the Madera County Transportation Commission Board will hear this at their May meeting. There will then be meetings here at the city of Madera, the city of Chowchilla, and at the county. These will all take place in the first 2 weeks of June. Provided that your folks all agree to, move this forward, then it'll come back to the Madera County Transportation Commission, and they will ask at their June meeting for the county to place it on the ballot. The county will have that action at their July 9th meeting to place it on the ballot. And at that point, they'll instruct the registrar of voters to add it to the piece. The idea is to give obviously enough time for voters to be able to look at the entirety of the measure and make an intelligent decision about what they want or don't want moving forward.
So what is the statutory deadline to get the measure on the ballot? What date is the deadline?
I want to say it's August, but I'm not, yeah, I think it's August.
Okay, and while you're up here,
Yep,
I do
yep.
have another question. Is the steering committee has the sole discretion to determine the allocation?
Yes,
So the elected officials nor the Transportation Commission or authority can make that determination.
so let me address that. We had a number of folks that felt in the last measure and in other things that whether I'm not going to get into whether it's real or imagined, but the perception was that perhaps there were folks that were appointed that were representing interests that were not in line with what the community wanted. So one of the things we really took on is trying to get a steering committee that was representative of all kinds. But I can tell you at least 3 or 4 people on that committee are perhaps not fans of some of the supervisors or fans of some of the elected. So we really did try to get a diverse group. We have 4 members that are under 25. We're equal in male and female. All 5 districts are represented, and the board of directors of the MCTA have suggested to us that they will abide by the recommendation of the steering committee. And I am not aware. In fact, I think Councilwoman Evans was with me on Monday night, I think it was, and I asked that very question of the chair, and she reiterated that that is her intention, and we believe that is the intention of the board.
My final question is, do you know how much money Madera County has received from self-help?
Yes, off the top.
Which number?
So off the top of my head, it was on that first slide. I believe it was 45 million and change. That is the money that goes directly to them, their allocation, but the regional funds, right? They've also received regional funds for regional projects. We'd have to take a look at the overall breakdown of those, but yeah. Oh,
Thank you.
that's
very
it.
much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Do we have any other comments? Please step up to the podium.
He's not finished yet.
So I have 2.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. I
Cut me
apologize.
off. Do I get to sit down and come back?
Oh, no, please, go ahead.
Okay. So run it back to the 3. I'll need all of it. No. So based on what I've heard tonight, we have a deadline of August to get this on or not. If Measure T does not get on the ballot or it fails, the city of Madera is hurt. What I'd like to know is how much money the city of Madera has gotten from Measure T. Instead of the percentages, I'd like to see the actual numbers and which projects that reflects. I have a concern about the steering committee making the decision on allocation because I see there's going to be a lot of push and pull from various communities. The lack of confidence in the Board of Supervisors might doom the measure. So the city of Madera needs the council to really reflect on those issues and look at what an equitable distribution is for allocation and run a parallel track to go it alone or sign on. But don't wait, because if you wait and you can't get on the ballot, it's over. If you get on the ballot based on Measure K collections, you'll receive 13 million a year. Over 20 years, that amounts to $260 million that can be matched. Over 30, it's 390 million. That's a lot of money to leave on the table. Thank you.
Just wanted to quickly add, if you go, I think you might have missed the beginning of the presentation, but the number is actually 34 million and change. On Measure T-2024, you can see the allocation by the city of Madera, the county and Chowchilla, as well as the annual audits for all of the agencies to see how monies were spent every single year. So that information is readily available. And we're also going to be looking at, I think I also mentioned earlier, staff and city manager's office were very vocal in representing for the city of Madera with the steering committee about the idea of really keeping it to either population or sales tax revenues. We are going to be presenting that information to that committee in April. And we've helped them understand, and I think they're a smart bunch. I think everyone is looking for really the most equitable and fair way to do things. We've been doing it this way for 35 years. The jurisdictions have kind of expressed that they'd like to keep it that way. The steering committee is asked to explore these other things, but they have not made that decision yet.
The jurisdictions have expressed what?
That they would like to keep it as it is with population.
So the current formula.
Yeah, yeah.
And my question.
Mr. McIntyre, can you please come up to
Sorry.
the mic, please, so that we can hear your comments?
Allocation equitable to the city of Madera.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, sir?
Is the current allocation equitable? I submit that it is not.
I'm curious because I get to ask questions too. How would you like to see it done?
I'd like to see it done by sales tax
Okay.
collections. Yeah.
So that's one of the things I'm louder, sorry.
Yeah.
That's one of the things.
I'll
we're
speak up.
presenting.
I can speak up.
There you
Trying
go. Well, I want to make sure people hear what you're saying
Yeah,
because
I appreciate
it's
that.
important. And again, the steering committee, a lot of them said the same thing. And they said, great, let's go with sales tax. From a consultant standpoint, to be honest, it's a better argument because if I tell you all the money that you spent in Madera stays in Madera, that could be a interesting conversation. So I would not be surprised if that's how they decide. But I would like to take that information back to them. So.
And in addition to the allocation, I'd want to see the actual distribution maintained. And if you're going to do this review annually,
It can't be changed.
you know, the current oversight committee has vacancies on it. I never hear from them. So I'm appreciative of the fact that there is an effort to be more transparent, because I think that was sorely lacking over the last several years. And also the fact that they did not put the sunset clause in the failed measure, that was a real blow to trust. Yeah. So it's out there. There is a trust issue out there.
Would you like to apply for the Citizens Oversight Committee?
Well, to be honest, I have and have never been appointed.
Thank you, Ms.
Council-
McIntyre. We do have another member of the public wishing to make a comment.
Thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you.
Actually, I just like to add that I think that what he was referring to is with the graphics, because that's a question that I also had. Like there were percentages that were presented versus dollar amounts in the graphics, and like you have to go into the website and dig deep to actually see the comparisons by the same.
I'll
Yeah.
add some, I have graphics to that effect. I will add those tonight. Sorry. I'm so used to be saying, go sit down. I have those graphics. I will add those tonight to the website because it also takes a look at how the allocations were done in percentages in easier to see form. Yes, I'll take care of that for you. I'm sorry. Hiding from me.
Hi, I'm Susan Merriman and I live on 4th Street as well at O. And I'll just say as a voter, when Measure T was on the ballot the last time, I hesitated in voting yes for it only because I haven't seen anything locally other than the repaving of 4th Street. The sidewalks had never been connected. The ADA ramps went in, but nothing was connected. And then there are several streets where my mother lived over on Jennings Street and Williams Avenue. They're just riddled with potholes. They keep getting filled in. The stuff just keeps coming out. It's very hard to walk on the streets, and they don't have sidewalks there. Also, a lot of those streets in that neighborhood don't have stop signs. And people assume, especially if they're not familiar with the neighborhoods, they just blow right through the intersection thinking the other street has the stop sign, and they don't. So I have to stop at every intersection, whether I have a stop sign or not, when I'm over there. But anyway, as far as voting, the only reason I voted yes for it last time was because of the funding that we would lose, the matching funding. And of course, it didn't pass, but I think that if if people like me that are seeing sidewalks that aren't completed or the roads are full of potholes, they're not going to vote yes for this because they're wondering where's the money going, you know? So I would think that if some of between now and August, when it has to get on the ballot, if the city public works can get out and patch up some of the roads, don't repave the whole thing, but patch them up, maybe complete some of the sidewalk connecting so that kids going to school can use a sidewalk instead of having to go in the street, up a driveway, back down into the street, that it may help get people out to vote yes for this measure. And then the other thing is 4th Street traffic is too fast, and there are a lot of children crossing at O Street. And they wait, sometimes 5 minutes for cars to stop before they can get across. Let's see. And as far as the bus routes go, there's nothing that neighborhood along 4th Street, there's no bus that goes down 4th Street. I mean, if I wanted to take a bus, I'd have to go all the way over to Schnoor or go somewhere along Yosemite near Olive. And if I felt like I could walk that far, then I would just walk to the grocery store, directly, which sometimes, you can't do. So, anyway. Oh, and then maybe if you do a project, a sidewalk or something, maybe put a sign there and say this was paid for with Measure T funding, and then the people know what Measure T funding goes to, and they'll appreciate it more. Okay, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you so much for saying that, because we just provided Public Works with new signs. And we encourage the city, also the city of Churchill, and others, because a lot of times people see things in their community that have improved and you don't know that it was Measure T. And believe me, no one's trying to hide that. It's just that sometimes it's not top of mind. So it's really important that, when you do have projects that are funded by Measure T, that you promote that up there in that way.
Thank you, Kendall. I'll ask if there's any other comments from our board, or I'm sorry, council for Kendall. We do have another comment from Ms. Becker.
Regarding the sidewalks, the city of Madera has just used $500,000 with a block grant fund and are making continuous improvements through Madera City Public Works. So you may see some new sidewalks. And that was totally a city initiative, but it was done with HUD funds. So we are making progress.
Excuse me, we're going to try to refrain from going back and forth. If you have comments, come up to the podium. Thank you. If you want to make a comment, please come out here. And we'll try to refrain from having a conversation directly between the workshop is for the council. Thank you.
Right. Okay. I did ask somebody last year whether or not I should spend my own money to put in a portion of sidewalk that goes along my property so that I don't have to keep mowing grass there and the kids have a place to walk. And I was told to hold on because there might be some money coming to it. That was last year or maybe a year and a half ago, and there still isn't. So that connectivity for safer, paths for kids to get to school. I mean, I'm right there in the path of, there's Jefferson, I guess I don't know what the other schools are called, but there's like 2 schools to one side of me and the high school to another. I mean, there's tons of foot traffic, and you'd think that that's should be a high priority area. A lot of kids go down O Street. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other comments from any other any members of the public? Did you have a comment, Mr. McIntyre? Okay. I will add that I've now served on the Transportation Commission for quite some years. And I will say that when I first came into the Transportation Commission, a lot of questions, kind of what the council is asking, a lot of the questions surrounding Measure T, monies, how are they dispersed? And you know, some of those questions went unanswered for some time. I recall coming in there requesting information regarding other distribution forms, right? And at the time it was population. We entertained possible miles. We entertained sales tax was something that I brought up. When we brought that up to the steering committee, the previous steering committee, that was quickly kicked out. I think certain jurisdictions were more apt to going forward with the population. But because of that, I think we initiated conversations with HDL, and that's how HDL came about. I think with as a consultant for the MCTC to provide those types of figures that some of you have been requesting. In this way, it's transparent as far as what sections of the county generate certain dollars, so that more of the constituency and or residents can see where their dollars are being generated. Now, one of the things in being in the MCTC gave me an opportunity to see that I came in there fighting, asking for more for the city. That's me, obviously representing the city, being the lead agency. And attending some of these conferences, you get to see that a lot of these self-help counties, again, they form coalitions in order to try to generate the maximum amount of dollars out there. I'm not saying that Madera on its own cannot do that, but it's very difficult to generate grants and millions of dollars for projects that serve regionally for us. Whether it be the widening of Olive, whether it be the Ellis Overcross, whether it be the 99, those types of projects require millions of dollars. And I don't think that Measure T in itself will satisfy all of the requests and all the wants that we want here at the city. I do like the fact that we serve as a coalition, so to speak, for the county. I know there's a lot of different perspectives as far as who's running what, who's doing what, whether supervisors or any electeds are doing their job. That's a whole different story. I think at the end of the day, if you look at the leverage that you can do, I think it's important. I hope that we can continue this measure for another 30 years. But again, that lies on the voters. As for me, if that doesn't happen, I think we've been very vocal about the city moving on its own. I think that's been very frustrating to see. Why would you not want this thing to go through, knowing that it's going to affect your communities more than it affects us? It's going to affect us in a big way, but it affects you even more. Not having that coalition, that other agencies that help you gain more funds, and that's really scary to see that. You know, we're having those conversations. This has been done for 30 years, right? How projects were done and who did what, it's a question that you can ask. But I can tell you that this board here and some of the members in the transportation had no doing of the previous 20 years. Moving forward, I think this is why the steering committee, and one of the questions was asked, why do we not have more a board direction when it comes to that? We tried that. And obviously that was one of the issues that people said, we don't want electeds involved in the decision making. Then why did you elect me? Why did you elect me? I want to represent in the best interest of the community. But again, that's why they gave them that steering committee. The steering committee has now found areas of deficiency, and they see that this is best for all communities. So I hope that this will work out in the future for all of us here. But I certainly would like to see this move forward. If it doesn't, obviously, kind of like to the gentleman that spoke earlier, we can run a parallel scenario. What would happen in the case that we don't? But you know, I would hope to see that this move forward and we continue to have that relationship. Otherwise, we'd be in competition directly with their county counterparts and or maybe Chowchilla for those grants. So those are my comments. And I don't know if there's anything else we want to add. Council members, if you have anything else you want to add. with that, we'll reach the conclusion of this presentation. Again, Kendall, thank you so much for presenting that. A lot of information out there. Again, you've given the public a lot of good information as to where they can go find more information about Measure T. I know you're still doing some of these presentations going forward. Is that correct? One more. Can you please let us know where that's taking place?
Yes, and the presentation just gets better every time. But yeah, tomorrow night I will be with the Supervisor Poitras, also available via Zoom, 6:30 p.m. For the Board of Supervisors. It'll be for District 3, but we will be reviewing all the impacts very much similar to what we did tonight for both the city of Madera and the county. And we'll make some last minute comments on or last additions for Chowchilla as well.
Awesome. With that, I'll now adjourn this meeting. Upcoming meetings are coming up for Wednesday, April 3rd and Wednesday, April 17th. This meeting is now adjourned. Did I?
It's May 1st. The 17th was canceled.
Okay,
My
so the
apologies.
17th was canceled, May 1st. Thank you again. Meeting adjourned. What's that?